Hello, hello. Welcome to today's episode in which we will talk about the ANC's failures. In case you haven't noticed by now, I've also made a video series about their victories because, well, everything has to be taken into consideration. In this video, we will be talking about their failures with regards to healthcare. And yes, look, I know some of you will think or say, yes, like everything was better under apartheid. Okay, that's just wrong. Like, it was better for some people, white people in specific, and it was worse for black people. Now it is still not great, but it's way, way, way better than a place like the DRC or Haiti or North Korea or these kinds of places. I don't think anyone can win an argument telling me healthcare is better in the DRC than it is in South Africa. You can go to South Africa and there will be some problems, right? Like your medication may not be there for serious illnesses like HIV or bipolar or whatever, medication may not be available. The MRI machine may be broken. The X-ray machine may be broken. You will have to wait in line for a long time. If you have a heart condition, you have to wait for a long time before the surgeons will be available. And, you may die. You may die your illness may become worse because of the healthcare situation in South Africa. However, I know people who have gone through the state system and they were perfectly fine. One of my colleagues, it was like an oldish man, like maybe 55 or something. He had some heart problems, serious heart problems, with the valves. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know what the issues were. And he had to go for the worst one you can get, like the quadruple bypass, whatever. It's super complicated. He was on the wait list for less than a year, and his operation was a perfect success. And then he just came back to work after, the recovery time was super quick as well. He just came back to work, and he wasn't disabled in any way whatsoever. He was it was a white collar worker, blue collar worker doing white collar jobs. I'm not going to go into the details, but there are some. I once was in a state hospital for I went to a music festival called Opikopi, and I drank too much, and then I fell down a hill because Opikopi in Afrikaans literally means on the hill. And the place where the music festival is on the hill, and there's a lot of the original one was on a single hill, back in the 90s or the 80s and the 90s was on this one hill. And the hill was pretty easy to climb, it was pretty stable. But then they made it as the thing grew, Woodstock or Lollapalooza or Glastonbury, or what's that other thing, Burning Man. They expanded it, and one of the stages they occupied more hills, and one of the hill I went to was the worst hill. It was something like a 35 or 30 degree angle. So the climb, the angle wasn't bad, but it was basically dust and rocks. It's in the middle of winter, it was like fall or spring. So it's not yet rain season. So there's still a lot of dust and rocks. South Africa's a dry country and the rocks are loose. And I stepped on one of these rocks, and because I was inebriated, I just fell and I tore my ligament in my ankle, the big one. I could basically not walk, it was super painful. And I just went back to my tent the next day because you camp there. And the next day, my ankle My foot looked like an elephant foot, like it was so swollen. And yeah, I was basically fucked. And my friends were like, they started drinking the next morning at 9 a.m. because, we're students. It's just the way it rocked. And there were no private hospitals in that. It's a very rural area of South Africa. So there was a clinic nearby, about 10 kilometers away, and they called the ambulance. An ambulance came to fetch me. And they took me to the state clinic, and yeah, it's like there were only a bunch of nurses because it was a weekend. The doctors were off duty. And they called him in, but the doctor stays close to the clinic. It's part of the deal. Like if you study medicine in South Africa, you have an internship with the state for 1 year. Personally, I think it should be longer. It should be 3 years or 5 years because of the immense cost of that the state has to pay for your education. But in any case, the doctor was pretty experienced. He was probably 30, 35 years old. And it was quite funny. He was like, "Oh, I see you've had a fairly fabulous festival so far." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess." And he was like, "Okay, yeah, it's not that bad. We'll have to take an X-ray, and I'm going to bandage it up for you. So I'm going to give you what do you call it? Anti-inflammatory, and it's the thing to reduce the swelling, that thing." And he bandaged it up to me, and the hospital gave me crutches for free, shitty crutches. They were made from wood, wood and synthetic leather, but they worked. I could go back to that. Oh yeah, they took a X-ray of the foot at the clinic as well, but the machine was a bit broken, so the guy could say, "Look, I don't really know what's going on. I can see some of it, and the bones look okay. You don't have a broken bone, but I can't see the tendons. So you'll have to get an MRI once you're back in the city," which I did. So my experience with the state healthcare was very positive. The one experience I had. Private healthcare is some of the best in the world, but since the ANC is the ruling party in this instance, in this video, we're going to address them in a state capacity mostly. So let's dive right in. The ANC has made strides in expanding healthcare access in South Africa, but its efforts have often been overshadowed by major challenges, mismanagement, and controversial policies that have weakened the country's healthcare system. From delays in addressing the HIV/AIDS epidemic to corruption and inefficiencies in public healthcare services, the ANC has faced significant criticism for its handling of healthcare, which has left many South Africans underserved and dissatisfied with the quality of care available to them. So, yeah, AIDS, South Africa's anonymous with AIDS. At one stage, we had the biggest infection rate in the world after Zimbabwe. And I think I spoke about it actually in the Victories video about how bad it was, which was kind of maybe inappropriate because it's a Victories video, but I mean, you may not watch the entire series. So I may as well mention it in both videos to an extent. AIDS was a scourge. It still is, but it was way, way worse in the late 90s and the early 2000s. It was like the bubonic plague. Freaking 1 in 5 people had it. The education around the virus was very poor. It took a while for the government to educate people, because I mean, it's supposed to come from the government, not NGOs. The NGO is there. The definition of an NGO is to step in when the government fails. So the government isn't supposed to fail, ever. They do fail because they're imperfect instruments. But in the case of something as deadly and malicious and like communicative as like HIV, AIDS, it's essential for the government to do something before NGOs even step in. NGOs may help, but the government has to do something. And they were just slow, like apart from the education, because education is important in the sense that if you know what it is, how you can get it, and how dangerous it is, and what you should do once you have it, the solution to the problem becomes much easier. That we had it when I was at school. We started getting education about HIV, and that was at school was the first time I heard it like once or twice before, but at school was the first time I heard. That was like maybe 1996, 1997. I had the birds and the bees like conversation, and like in South Africa, the birds and the bees conversation, like after pregnancy, they focus on STD, what do you call it? STDs and AIDS in particular. Like, remember, syphilis isn't like really a problem, or herpes. Like, okay, herpes like is just a scandal virus, like an awkward virus, but it's not dangerous. Like syphilis, you can treat with antibiotics. AIDS, however, is like, it's a death. It's not a death sentence anymore. Not if you take the medicine. You won't live until you're like 100, but it's no longer as bad as it was. But in any case, the education I received around it was very broad. Like the South African birds, and maybe it's changed. I don't know what's going on in schools these days, but like the birds and the bees conversation I had at school, or the lecture I received, the majority was about AIDS. And it was quite funny. A few years ago, a friend of mine from Egypt, he invited me to a lecture at the mosque about AIDS. And I was like, dude, I know a lot about AIDS, because I'm South African. Apart from my school education, you just read it in the news. You just need to read the newspaper for 2 weeks in South Africa at that time to know about AIDS. These days, the last 20 years, it's basically I don't want to say retarded. Yeah, I'm just going to say retarded. You're retarded if you don't know anything about AIDS. But it wasn't always like that. In the 90s, we knew very little about it. So it was the same as the US in the 80s. That's how South Africa was in the 90s. The only difference was after the US freaked out, after the AIDS scare of the 80s, they started doing something about it immediately. I remember watching that movie Dallas Buyers Club with what's his name again? Matthew McConaughey. Man, that movie was crazy. It was a good movie, but I was just it was so sad, It was like, oh my word. But after this, the US government did do something about it. And it was mostly amongst men. It was like a male disease. In South Africa, it was, all genders, but actually women in particular. How can I say this in a politically correct way? Females were disproportionately affected by AIDS, unfairly so, very, very unfairly so. I do not have a lot of positive words for the behavior of South African men. And it's very sad when I know a woman who has died from AIDS, and it was sad. It was shocking. it's not nice seeing this, because it takes a while for them to die. And you know, this is where it was so sad. And like, she died because she couldn't get the medicine, she couldn't get the medication. Like, she would go to the clinic, and it wasn't available. And like, privately, it was basically too expensive. You have to have like a relatively good medical aid to basically cover this. And the medical aid only pays out if you got the virus after you've initiated your policy. Like, you know, that's how insurance companies work. You know, like, they ask you, if you get car insurance, how many accidents have you had? And you have to truthfully answer. If you lie, then they just don't pay out. And they love doing that, by the way. Like, insurance companies are very good at saving money. Like, that's why it's a private company. Private companies don't operate if they can't make a profit. So, you know, if you get AIDS and you're not covered by private medical aid in South Africa, you're in deep trouble. And that's why so many people died, is because of the disproportionate, you know, the distribution of wealth in South Africa. Only rich people or the middle class the small middle class. We have a small middle class in South Africa. This is one of the biggest problems in South Africa. We have a small middle class. If we had a big middle class, we would have had tax money to fix all our problems. But it's a small middle class, and only those people, the rich and the middle class, can afford private medical aid. And essentially, like, you know, this is the massive failure of the state. In other words, like the ANC in the 90s and the noughties, like, they just failed, you know, dismally. And let's continue. One of the ANC's most widely criticized healthcare failures was its initial response to the HIV/AIDS crisis. Under former President Thabo Mbeki, the ANC government's approach to the HIV/AIDS was marked by denialism and skepticism about established medical science. It's a bit like, what's that crazy guy in the US? Robert Kennedy, like, yeah, Robert Kennedy Jr., or, you know, the new, like, Trump's guy, you know, the anti-vaccine guy. Like, that's how Thabo Mbeki was. Mbeki publicly questioned the link between HIV and AIDS, and expressed suspicion towards antiretroviral drugs, ARVs, which were proven to slow the progression of the disease and save lives. This stance led to the significant delays in the rollout of ARV treatment, resulting in what is widely regarded as a preventable health disaster. Studies have estimated that these delays contributed to premature deaths of hundreds of thousands of South Africans, and the birth of thousands of HIV-positive children who could have been protected with proper medication. I think that President Thabo Mbeki is the best president South Africa has ever had. This AIDS was his biggest mistake. Like, there's two theories why this has happened, or two ideas. Like, one is that he was genuinely skeptical about the virus, that he thought that this was like something that was not serious or blown out of proportion by the Americans and the Europeans, that you could like save lives by simply eating in a nutritional way. and that the reason the virus was so malicious was because of malnutrition amongst the poorest of the poor. So he suggested like the people should eat more beetroot, ginger, and garlic. Now, there's two ways to look at this. Like, one is that beetroot, garlic, and ginger are in fact very healthy. Like in a place like China, for example, these are considered to be very healthy vegetables, and people consume a lot of it. Like, many Chinese people love garlic. If you go to a Chinese restaurant, you'll see it in abundance. Beetroot as well. Beetroot, like, it's I believe it's a strong antioxidant, as is ginger. It's a traditional medicine globally. Ginger is a traditional medicine. Garlic also. So you see, these things are traditional medicines. They may, some of it is superstition, but some of it is genuine. You use something and it works. And that's why like these psychedelics, like psilocybin, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, psilocybin, the magic mushrooms, that's been proven there's an agent in it that may lower depression. Okay, so it doesn't fall from the sky, there is some proven science in it. If you get a massive wound, on your arm, there are some herbs that you can apply. And look, it's not modern Western medicine, but that herb makes a difference. It's proven. However, and garlic has some antibiotical properties. Now you're gonna laugh at me. And think I'm a retard, and possibly I am retarded, but and stupid and ignorant. But we can't know everything, can we? Can we? The human brain is very limited. But you see, when I get sick, when I feel there's a cold coming on, I consume garlic. I not a bit. I consume a house. I take the house, I peel off all the the outside white peel, and I chop it up and I consume it raw. It's disgusting, by the way. It burns your mouth. It just burns your mouth. But you consume it with a glass of milk. Especially it goes down best with fresh milk, pasteurized fresh milk, not the UHT milk. And then you just half a teaspoon, drink a swiggy down with milk, another half a teaspoon, swiggy down with milk until you finish the house. You're going to smell like shit for the next 2 days, but you will see that the flu, maybe I am totally wrong, but with my body, and it has happened multiple times, and you can believe me or not, it's your choice. The flu, I still get sick from the flu. I take this medicine along with vitamin C and a lot of water. I drink a lot of water, 3 liters, when I get sick, until the illness has stopped. Only for flu and colds. The duration of the flu is less. It comes down to where, if I don't do it, it's about 10 days. If I do it, it comes down to 3 to 4 days. And the severity is not as bad. Less of a running nose, less congestion, less burning of the lungs, it's just that the flu is less bad. Now, with something like cancer, AIDS, monkeypox, coronavirus, if garlic, vitamin C, ginger, if these things help, that help is negligible because of the maliciousness of the virus. The cold virus, or the flu virus, is one of the most highly successful viruses because it doesn't kill the host. If a virus, like what's that, Marburg, or what's the other crazy one from the DRC? It's on the tip of my tongue. Like those viruses that kill you within days, like 2 days, 3 days, like basically those things kill the host. So although it's a deadly virus, it doesn't get transmitted because it kills the host before it transmits. Now, the flu virus doesn't kill the host, so it just spreads across the globe and rapidly, and then we mutate as humans to fight off the virus. We get our antibodies, like learn what it is, and then, well, the virus mutates, and the next season or 2 years later you will get another version of the same virus, and then you get sick again. But the virus is successful because it doesn't kill the host. Cancer and like HIV doesn't work like that. And the Marburg virus, they kill the host, and they do so pretty quickly. So these things need Western, or I'm not going to go Western, because it's India makes fantastic drugs, as does China, but like you need to apply modern medicine to fight these things off. Like cancer, AIDS, good luck. You can pray as many times as you want in a day. And I'm sorry if you're religious, if this offends you, but unfortunately, this is the truth. And if you are a truther, do your own research kind of person, I'm sorry, but like HIV will kill you if you don't drink like proper modern medicine, and you'll die from it in any case. The medicine just make it less severe, okay? And Zika virus as well, from South America. Zika is like, a virus that is pretty malicious, and it's only modern medicine that can save you. Now, what happens is, unfortunately, with these conspiracy theorists, so there's this idea that President Mbeki thought the crisis is either overblown or exaggerated, or he thought that it's like some chemical weapon, from the CIA or whatever. He never said that, but some people think he may have thought that, and allegedly. And then there's another theory that he wasn't a conspiracy theorist at all, like that he was very smart, he knew exactly what it was, but that at that time, in the late 90s, when he was president, the ARVs, South Africa didn't have the patent to make the drugs cheaply. South Africa's got a great pharmaceutical industry, by the way. We can make all of our own drugs, like not as cheaply as India. The Indians can make the drugs in much larger quantities, much cheaper and much quicker than we can. However, we can make it. And we could have made our own to save our own people, but we didn't have the patent, so we couldn't do it. We had to purchase them from the US and Europe. And these European companies didn't really want to give us a discount. Now, look, a country like South Africa, at that time, it was, 15 rands for a euro, or 10 rands for $1. So you see, the medication then becomes 10 times more expensive. If they give us a discount, unfortunately, a 10% a 5, 10, even a 20% discount won't cut it. You need to give us a 80, 90% discount for us to be able to afford it in the quantities that we need it. And they didn't want to, because freaking these companies were greedy. I'm not against capitalism. I am not. I know how long it took to develop the patent. I know that a lot of money and a lot of risk went into like the development of the patent. But you have to be human. You have to consider like the humanity in it. Like you have to have empathy with other people. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us different than freaking like monkeys and hippopotami, whatever, like these things. We are human. We have like empathy with one another. We're a social species. That's why we have religion. Like we are supposed to care for one another. And I understand the necessity, the need and desire to make money for your investment. But if people are dying, and you can still make some money. The government was willing to pay. But let's say then, instead of taking a 10% margin, isn't taking a 1% margin still okay? You're still making money. And what you can do, you can strike a deal with the government. You can say, look, we will give you the best we can. We can't give it to you for free. We have shareholders, but we can give you a 90% discount. We will just be making a 1 or a 5% margin of profit on this. All we want you to do is publicly state for the next however long you will be taking buying this medication from us at this discount, to be stating, like, let's say once a week, that we are providing this medicine to you and how good a company we are. That's free marketing. Look at how much marketing money goes into marketing. How much money does Coca-Cola spend on marketing? And now it's almost, Coca-Cola almost doesn't need to market itself. That's how strong the brand is, you see. Like pharmaceutical companies, they're not as strong, like Pfizer and Roche. In fact, they're distrusted, because of what is seen as, price gouging and profiteering from illnesses. Like, what was that other guy, Pharma Bro? What's it, Shrekley, that Albanian American guy who he used these dodgy Wolf of Wall Street tactics to buy that pharmaceutical company, and then he hiked the price by 1,000%. You see, there's a huge, I'm very against conspiracy theorists and stuff like that, but I do acknowledge conspiracies. I do acknowledge the formation of cartels, and this is, they are seen like that. Everybody, any capitalist will acknowledge the need for profit, but not at the expense of human suffering and death. Then rather go out of the business. If this is your business, like asking ridiculous prices for medicine, selling weapons, selling landmines, do you want to be part of such a business? What kind of human are you? I'm sorry. Okay, I understand if you're a country like Armenia, then maybe you need to buy landmines. But there's very few places that, where this is necessary. You see, and Thabo Mbeki was a bit... I always say South Africa is a socialist country. I'm going to make a video about the South African economy, a proper series, because economy is not a small thing, it's a long thing. There's newspapers dedicated to the South African economy that comes out every day. So it's a very broad field. South Africa is a socialist country, but President Thabo Mbeki had some neoliberal tendencies. And according to him, there's a theory, allegedly, that he said, we can't afford it. And because we can't afford it, we should turn to traditional medicine. And then people got sick. They didn't have the medicine. And then there were people, if you look at Uganda's strategy against AIDS, at one stage Uganda had the highest death rate. Like, Uganda was insane. They had insane prices insane deaths because of AIDS. The Ugandan government, and Uganda is a pretty conservative Christian government, like they said, abstinence, sexual abstinence. You only have like intimacy with your close partner, specifically your wife. That's it. That's it. No one else. And the government actively promoted it almost every day. And then suddenly there was this precipitous drop in infection in Uganda because the government, it was almost a propaganda. The government they stopped the propagation of the virus because they cut off the way it can travel. If you give the virus to someone else, you either give it to your wife or your husband. No one else, And the thing is, because South Africa is much more liberal, when some NGOs and some prominent religious figures proposed the solution, they were shot down. And the argument was like, how dare you tell us to use our bodies? This is like a retrogressive colonial way of telling us what to do. Because of that as well, people died. So this is also an ANC failure, in the sense that they were too liberal in a time where religious conservatism, I'm not a fan of religious conservatism, but in this case, there is patent evidence that religious conservatism in Uganda saved lives, hundreds of thousands of lives, possibly. And there's a lot of evidence for this. If it worked in Uganda, which is just a couple of thousand kilometers away from South Africa, you can drive there in 2 or 3 days. Like, if it worked in Uganda, why can't it work in South Africa? Uganda is still, it's Middle Central Africa, but it's almost Southern Africa. It could have worked. Like, it wasn't attempted because of these weird religio-ideological approach and ideas of people. Mbeki's Minister of Health, Manto Chabalala Msimang, further exacerbated the crisis by promoting alternative treatments such as garlic, lemons, and beetroot, rather than supporting scientifically proven ARVs. Her promotion of unproven remedies was met with international criticism and public outcry, as it undermined efforts to combat the epidemic and sowed confusion amongst South Africans. The government's denialist stance created a public health crisis, with NGOs and activists, including the Treatment Action Campaign, TAC, forced to take the government to court to compel it to provide ARVs in public hospitals. This period remains a dark chapter in South Africa's healthcare history and its lasting criticism of the ANC's handling and public health. So, this is insane. So, Mbeki delayed it, but this Minister Manto Chabalala Msimang she stuck to her guns. Like, she wouldn't move. Like, she was interviewed so many times and she would not budge an inch. She was like, these things, will work. Your medication, these ARVs won't work. And this NGO called the Treatment Action Campaign, TAC, this is one, the treatment, I don't know if they still exist. Maybe they do. Like the Treatment Action Campaign, or TRC, TAC is one of the most prominent and well-known NGOs in South Africa. Their leader, Zaki Ahmad, will go down in history as one of South Africa's greatest heroes because his singular determination to push the government to provide these medications. And unfortunately, because of the speed of South African courts, by the way, he himself had AIDS, to which he later succumbed. He had medication, but he fought for people who didn't have medication. Probably one day, they will make a movie about him, something like that, like Buyers Club, and it will both be a happy and a sad movie. He deserves a movie. If someone hasn't already made one of him, maybe I should make a movie. I don't know how to make a movie. I can't. I'm incompetent of such things. But someone should make a movie about him because the story is you can basically make a Netflix series about AIDS in South Africa and or rather not just AIDS in South Africa, the fight against AIDS in South Africa. It will be a very compelling story. Your script is basically essentially already written. You just need to do it. In the years following the HIV/AIDS denialism controversy, the ANC-led government did expand access to ARVs, and South Africa now is one of the largest HIV programs in the world. However, the initial delay in addressing the crisis and the loss of countless lives remain a lasting stain on the ANC's healthcare legacy, symbolizing the human cost of political decisions made without regard for scientific consensus. So it's the ignoring of science. And there's many, what we call in Afrikaans, my native language, sondebokke, bucks of sin, culprits. That's the English translation. Culprits in this thing. President Mbeki is by no means the only culprit. To this day, you get science deniers. And look, I understand people's will or their reasons to deny science. People are scared. Fear is it's one of the strongest drivers of human psychology. That's why we are alive and thriving as a human species, is because of fear. Fear is much stronger than let's say love or greed or something like that, or happiness. Fear is a real driver. It's what keeps animals alive. Have you noticed, by the way, elephants? Elephants are the biggest mammals on Earth. Whales are killer whales and blue whales and sperm whales, humpback whales, land animals. Elephants are the biggest land animals on Earth. Have you seen these videos, these nature videos, when you approach the pack of elephants in a helicopter, they run away. A helicopter doesn't kill animals, elephants. I know elephants are highly intelligent. Animals are highly intelligent. They know after a while what kills them. And you have how do I say this politely? No, I can't. You have fucknuts who shoot elephants from a helicopter. Okay, real bastard. If you have to hunt something, you shouldn't hunt things that's almost extinct. But if you really, really, now and then there are too many elephants and you have to cull the population, because that's just, I will make a video about this, but at least use a bow and arrow, be a real man or a real woman and go and kill the thing our ancestors did. Don't shoot it from a helicopter. Maybe that's why elephants run, but in general it's weird. It's weird that elephants run away from helicopters, and it's because they are scared. it's an unknown thing. So what science almost always does is it shows us things we didn't know. And quite often these things we don't know is shocking because it opens up your mind or forces it open. And, hence conspiracy theories and stuff like that. But in the case of HIV, AIDS, there is no room for conspiracy theories or, a pushback against science because people will die, you see. And this is the problem. People are so scared of these things. But the ANC should have known better. Like if you're a government, I am sorry, you have to do what's best for the people. You shouldn't fall prey to conspiracy theories. You should follow science. Like scientists, like how many governments have so many, I don't want to talk about weird sci-fi governments, but like how many governments have enough scientists in government? Like people who know how things work. Like very few governments, if any at all. And you see, it's fine, I guess, if you don't have scientists in government. Like, there was this one Simpsons episode where there's this town decision in Springfield to only make people with a high IQ run the town. And it was Lisa, it was Professor Frink, I think comic book guy, and they ran the town. And then it was a disaster. Okay, so I understand. Look, scientists don't know everything. Obviously, they're human. That's why governments are usually run by lawyers, sociologists, because they are more appropriate for running governments. But you still need to have the intelligence to know you don't know everything, and in many instances, you need to call in an expert, and believe the expert when they tell you something. And you see, this is a problem with the ANC, was this arrogance. This is why they lost the May election of 2024, is this arrogance to think you know everything. You don't. None of us do. You may be an expert. You may have a PhD in astronomy. You may be like Michael Kaku, that physicist. You may be that person. Michael Kaku doesn't know a lot about ocean biology, for example. He can't. He has only so many hours in a day. His life is only as long. He can only do so much before he dies, you see. So you can't know everything. And it's exactly for that reason you need to work as a team. You need to work as a society, as a group, as a government. And in this instance, HIV/AIDS, the ANC has failed spectacularly. And this initial delay cost hundreds of thousands of lives, as I mentioned earlier. There's many studies, many papers about the exact number. I read one paper, I couldn't believe it, where they mention 1 million people. 1 million. Which isn't impossible, because in the 90s, if they say we had one in 5 South Africans had HIV or AIDS, do the math. Like, what was the population in the year 2000? Was it like 35 million? Do the math, like 1/5 of that. To say that 1 million people died isn't far-fetched. Now, I don't have the numbers, but you can go and check yourself. Like, the reason why this isn't seen as like some Holocaust, which it is to an extent, is because the virus kills you over such a long time, 10 years, I believe. from, it can be, well, it can differ. It can be very quick and can take longer. But I think the average is 10 years from what I have learned. And then you don't see it. Like, because you have HIV, it stays like that for a very long time. You don't know you have the virus. Like, and then it becomes AIDS, and then your immune system collapses, and it's downhill quickly from there on. So you don't see, and the people they get like, what's the most common one? It's tuberculosis, isn't it? So someone starts coughing. And oh yeah, by the way, like, you already probably have 2 or 3 strains of tuberculosis in your body. You just don't know it because your immune system works perfectly. But we all have bacteria and viruses in our blood because it's just the way these things propagate. But your immune system is this perfectly engineered system. It's fantastic. Biology is fantastic. It's really cool how everything works. I can understand fully how people are religious because it's so fantastic. You know, like, life on Earth is just, life in general is just fantastic. It's so cool. So people start coughing once they get AIDS, and it seems like they have the flu. And then suddenly 3 months later, they are dead. So it doesn't seem like a Holocaust, but it is a Holocaust. And I know, like, the president didn't want to kill these people. The minister, Tshabalala Msimang, didn't want to kill people. I know this, but like, they did by accident, allegedly, or whatever. You know, like, it was under their watch. So it's just so sad, and it was unnecessary. Even if you say, yeah, but the greedy Europeans and Americans didn't want to give us drugs, that's a fine argument. I don't disagree with that. But we could have done what Uganda did, seriously. And it would have saved lives, you know. And this, in their grace, like, you can say they did respond. But only after Mr. Zaki Ahmad forced them to in the courts, and only after the bodies started piling up. It's not in the script, but we actually had something in South Africa called AIDS orphans. These were kids, babies, whose both parents died from HIV, and they were lucky enough to somehow not get the virus, because it's not, you don't get, I don't know, please, if you're a doctor, any doctors out there or nurses, please give some comments on this video. Tell us more about AIDS, because it still exists and it's still very dangerous. Tell us more about AIDS, how it can be prevented, how governments specifically should react to it. How do we remove a lot of the problems now is stigma, you know, like, oh, can I get AIDS from kissing someone? We know you can't, but like, please provide us with more information so we can attempt to finally put this beast, to finally slay this beast. You know, it probably will never be fully slain, but we can try to. We should try to, because it's nasty and we don't want more people dying. Like, let's think about this and let's try. If you can comment, please leave your advice as a scientist, as a doctor. The AIDS orphans, when I read about it, I remember when I first read about it, I was so shocked. I was just, what? And a week or 2 weeks later, it started dawning on me how awful this is, how unique this problem is, how insane it is. Like, and how did we get here? How do we solve this problem? This is like a sociological phenomenon where, you know, which is this unique, weird traumatic problem, like the Lebensborn in Germany and Norway, these special kids, which has been traumatized by this experience. Imagine that. Not only are you an orphan, being an orphan is bad enough. Like if both your parents die in a car accident, that's bad enough, that's traumatic. Imagine they die from a disease, and a disease that could have been delayed by an ARV, and you saw them dying like their last 3 months, coughing, getting more sick, after a while being unable to get up out of bed, growing thinner and thinner. Imagine seeing that. And then they're dead. And one of two things happen. You have an extended family that may take you in, if they have the money. If like they themselves, because of the structures, the poverty and inequality in South Africa, they may not have money to take you in. And you have to go to an institution. The institution is struggling because the institution, the orphanages, the state orphanages, don't get enough money. The church orphanages basically get no money, very little money from the state. So you've been traumatized by this. And then you go to this institution where there's probably not the psychologist to help you through this trauma, to do CBT on you, cognitive behavioral therapy, to help you to get through this. Like it's a scar. It's a massive scar on South Africa, you see. And I have no idea how many minutes this video is already, but it's going to be a long video because this AIDS thing is really a massive, massive disaster that has befallen us. And it's unique in the sense that AIDS doesn't care. It's a virus. It doesn't care about your age. It doesn't care about your religion. It doesn't care about your gender, although women can get it more often. It doesn't care about your gender. It doesn't care about your class or your caste, how much money you get. It doesn't care about your race. It doesn't care about your culture. It doesn't care about your nationality. You can get it. However, South Africa was hit disproportionately hard. And it's almost impossible to lay the blame in front of anyone except the ANC. And one may argue it's Minister Tshabalala Msimang and President Thabo Mbeki who bears most of the blame, and maybe they do. But it's a general failure. It's a general failure of the ANC, because the ANC, remember, the ANC isn't like, it's not like North Korea or like, let's say France, where the president have like a disproportionate amount of power. The ANC, like, there's a lot of like people making decisions. These decisions weren't made in isolation. This is why I'm calling it an ANC failure and not a President Thabo Mbeki failure. Yes, he's failed, but it's the ANC as a whole. And we should never forget this. Like, for two reasons. Like, whenever the ANC is still an existing party and they're the biggest party in South Africa, and I'm not saying don't vote for the ANC because of this, because it's historic, it's already been done, damage is already done, so it shouldn't affect your voting pattern. I'm just saying this video should be a reminder of what can happen when a virus strikes, what can happen when any disaster strikes, and how you should deal with it as a government. And I think the biggest lesson we can take away from this AIDS crisis, is science. That whenever, look, one shouldn't one shouldn't like look at movies all the time and draw conclusions from them. But remember, movies are pieces of art. Art is an expression of humanity. It's an expression of what we see and what we observe as humans, what is real or what we imagine. And in these movies, like I saw a meme the other day, I should do more editing on my videos and maybe like include it in the video. But the meme said, in any disaster movie, any disaster movie begins by people ignoring the scientists. This is another reason I started making YouTube videos, is there is this assault on science. I am not a scientist. Like, I studied engineering, which is kind of the dumb science of just observing or doing what the science said and like trying to apply it in the real world to get a practical benefit from it. It's far removed. But like anything, all of us, if you went to school, you would have had to deal with science. Like, what do I have anything here? Yeah, I happen to have some tissues here. Look, it fell to the ground. It fell to the ground because of Newton's law of gravity. And we know how quickly this fell. We knew it fell at, what was it like? No, it's not 10 Newton. Is it 10 kilometers per hour? No. I forgot my science. You see how pernicious it is. Like, we don't even know all the science at the tip of our fingers. That's how we make these mistakes. However, we know there's gravity. We can measure gravity. We know what the gravity of the sun is. We know the gravity of the moon. We know many things. But we can't know everything. However, there are people who know a lot. We know exactly how this works. If they don't, they know exactly how to find it quickly. The scientists, and they're just being ignored, you see, about almost everything. Like, it seems people are more concerned about nuclear war or more concerned about the asteroid eating the Earth. The chances of these things are relatively small. And they're not concerned about coronavirus or AIDS or, global warming, which has a much higher probability of doing real damage, like taking lives, than an asteroid eating the Earth. Okay, let's get real. Let's continue. Beyond HIV/AIDS, the ANC has struggled with corruption, inefficiencies, and declining service quality in the public healthcare system. Corruption within the healthcare sector has diverted resources away from essential services and reduced the effectiveness of healthcare delivery. Alleged fraud and embezzlement have plagued the National Department of Health, with funds meant for infrastructure, development, equipment and medicine, often misappropriated by officials and contractors. This has left many public hospitals and clinics under-resourced, with inadequate staff, outdated equipment, and frequent shortages of essential medicines. It is impossible to talk. If you're going to make a video about South Africa, there are very few videos that you can make about South Africa, except if it's like a makeup video or a cultural dancing video, or amapiano video, or a trekking video, or these kinds of things. Like any other thing, I don't want to say serious because that's condescending towards people who make interesting makeup videos. Makeup videos serve a big purpose. It's important for for women or young women who want to use makeup. I don't use makeup because, I just don't like. Maybe I should. I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that. What was my point? It's important. It's impossible to in general to make a video about South Africa and not mention corruption. And the corruption, I know. The apartheid government was also corrupt, and you can measure it. Well, to an extent, we don't know because they were pretty good at hiding things, like most corrupt people are. But like the ANC was massively corrupt, mostly under President Jacob Zuma, who almost destroyed the country. But it was a long time coming. We spoke about it in the ANC Failures, about the history. They started stealing money even before they came into office. So, and then it just snowballed out of control. Like it's Game of Thrones. Like, because the ANC is this broad church, as we said, there's so many factions, to get your 60% majority, like under President Mbeki, they at one stage they had, I think they had 67% of the vote, which is a super majority in South Africa, 2/3. The mythical golden 2/3 majority in parliament. That enables you to change the constitution, by the way. That's how powerful they were. Like, it's a broad, to get that 2/3, that mythical 2/3, you see, it's a broad coalition of people that have to get together. And some of them, unfortunately, want meal tickets. Either meal tickets, like just a few $1,000 to buy groceries, or like 2 fucking Maseratis and a freaking house in Cape Town, a 3-story house in Cape Town overlooking the ocean. They want these things. So, of course, there's corruption. And then there's corruption like now about, I don't know, I want to check this out in details. I'm not going to say a date, but when the state fails, the private sector starts failing as well. Then you start getting, because remember, in a capital system, you still need to regulate private industry, or else they'll do whatever they want. And especially if it's a monopoly. And then, like, you start getting corruption in the private sector as well. What I'm trying to say is corruption is one of the biggest problems in South Africa, if not the biggest. I'm going to do a video about what I think the biggest problems are, but it's arguable. When we look at public health care in South Africa, it's been so damaged by corruption. I wish I had the numbers in front of me. I should make more numbers. I should put more numbers in my scripts. But like, although numbers change, like, however, you can just go and have a look. Like, the damage done by corruption is massive. Is massive. We can have such a good healthcare system if there's just not corruption, and the ANC is just allowed this. The National Health Insurance, or NHI plan, an ambitious initiative by the ANC aimed at achieving universal healthcare in South Africa, that's a bit like Obamacare, has also faced significant criticism and skepticism. While the goal of the NHI is to ensure that all South Africans have access to quality healthcare, critics argue that the plan has been poorly implemented and suffers from lack of clarity and transparency. The NHI proposal has raised concerns about the government's ability to fund and manage a system that would provide equitable healthcare, given the existing challenges in public healthcare administration. The ANC's inability to convincingly address these concerns has led to widespread public doubt about the feasibility of the NHI, with many South Africans fearing that it could lead to further corruption and mismanagement within the healthcare sector. So you see, I should mention this in every video so it won't get taken out of context. Like, I'm a centrist. If I'm not a centrist, like on some things, like I'm like Joe Rogan. On some things I lean left, on other things I lean right. I think I'm mostly a bit libertarian, but I'm also socialist. Like, look, a unified healthcare system is kind of better. I understand if you're one of these people who don't smoke, don't drink, you have good genes, like you jog 5 times a week, you only eat vegetables, chicken breast, whatever, like, you do yoga, you do meditation, you sleep 8 hours a day, you drink 3 liters of water a day. I understand that you don't want to pay for someone who's a freaking chain smoker, who drinks like freaking 6 liters of beer a week, who eats like a pig, who freaking sleeps 5 hours every evening, who works themselves to death, sits every day who sits like 16 hours of the day on a chair. I understand that you don't want to pay the healthcare of these people. It's perfectly normal. It's a perfectly normal argument. I understand that. But you also have to take into consideration, and I think I've kind of alluded about it in other videos, that healthcare is a society problem or a society concern or like responsibility. If someone falls sick, that will affect you, even if you're a healthy person. Like, if that person who has fallen sick needs medicine or medication or money to get well again, or rather money in the form of treatment not to die or not to suffer agonizing pain every day. If this is the case and that money or resources aren't available, that person may be a son of a very sick mother. It may be a father of a very sick son. For those of you who are parents, what will you do? What are you willing to do if your only child, your 5-year-old child, is sick and can be healed, can be stopped from dying if they get a certain care? What will you do? How much money will you spend? You'll probably tell me, like, you'll do everything you can. And that's natural, because like that's the evolutionary, the religious, the cultural drive of parenthood, right? Now, does that include theft? Does it include hijacking a car to get money? Does it include murdering another person for money? Maybe not. It depends on the person. It depends on who you are, what you value. Like, maybe you value, maybe you're a very conservative Christian or Muslim or Hindu or whatever, or just a humanist who believe that, okay, you would rather see your child die than steal to buy medicine to save him. It's perfectly fair. It's a perfectly fair argument. But some people will do anything to save the ones they love or to relieve the pain of the ones they love. And that will come at the cost of society if society doesn't help those people. So you see, medical health care, insurance is important for society as a whole. You can't just live in society and build high walls and think you can isolate your problems from everyone else. It's not possible. People cross thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people cross the Mediterranean Ocean in storm conditions on shitty boats to get from Africa to Europe, to have a better life, So you can't isolate yourself from these problems. So you have to, there's a strong argument. I'm not saying you have to, but there's a strong argument like to pay for NHI or National Health Insurance or Obamacare. There's a strong argument for that. But you as the government, you can't steal that money. You can't steal that money. Like, freaking, it's meant for the sick people. It's meant for people who really need it. So of course, if you are a law-abiding taxpayer who works very hard, who's like, let's say, in the top 10, 5% of income earners, it's very fair for you to say, I don't want to see, I will pay this tax, I'll pay this 10,000 rands a month tax for the NHI, but I don't want you to see it, one, stolen, two, spent on useless stuff that's unnecessary, three, having seen it spent on people who are incompetent, four, seeing it spent in a way that's inefficient. Like, you don't want to see any of those four things, and that's very fair, and I understand that. And this is the problem, and this is why, like, there's this reductionist argument in South Africa that when people are against, I'm on the fence with NHI. I think we should have NHI, but I'm skeptic about whether it will work because of the culture of corruption. Can you snap your fingers and cure South Africa of corruption? No. And it's like, yeah, I know corruption comes from apartheid, but the ANC really accelerated it. And you see, like, how will the ANC government deal with NHI? Will the money be stolen, yes or no? If yes, and statistically, if we look at all the other state-owned enterprises, all the other state entities and functions and like projects and initiatives of the government, money has been stolen. There's very few places that have, like, what do they call it again, the accountants, unqualified audits. I think it's unqualified audits. Like, there's very few places or initiatives that have that. Now, you're trying to tell me that the biggest thing that they've ever trying to do, much bigger than the 2010 World Cup, all the infrastructure that went along with that, much bigger than that. Like, now you're trying to implement this thing and you're telling me there's going to be no corruption. I'm going to say that's impossible. So let's say there will be corruption. Okay, then the next question is the corruption and inefficiency and stupidity and malfeasance. Okay, that's fair. There's going to be that. Now, the second question is how much? How much of that will be there? Because if it's only 5%, that's a small knock. Even, I dare say, 20%, It's a lot, but it's handleable. But if it becomes 50%, we have a real problem. Then there will be a tax revolt. People will say, you're like freaking wasting my money. You're stealing it. You're, whatever. And then, like, apart from, because then these high income taxpayers, they all, people love South Africa. South Africans love South Africa. I love South Africa. It's very difficult to find an unpatriotic South African. But these people will be like, I'm just going to go to Australia. It's easier. Wherever. I'm going to go to China, Argentina, the UK, the USA. Like, one of my friends went to the USA 2 weeks ago, which is because they have no future in South Africa. I understand it. It's fair. Like, who will suffer the most out of this? It will be the sick people, the people who need to benefit from this NHI. So I am pro NHI, or I'm sitting on the fence with it. But if the ANC wants to implement it, they have to do a lot of house cleaning. A lot of house cleaning. And it's the right-leaning opposition's argument, and it's kind of my argument as well. First, clean house. Like, fix what we have. Fix the current public health system. And then we can talk about, like, a quasi-nationalization of private healthcare into a union with the state. Then we can discuss it. But before, you're just like trying to destroy something, like to get votes. That's what it seems like. Public healthcare infrastructure remains a major point of criticism for the ANC, as many healthcare facilities, particularly in rural areas, lack basic amenities and are in poor condition. Understaffing and poor working conditions for healthcare professionals are pervasive issues, contributing to a demoralized workforce and a shortage of skilled healthcare providers. Many doctors and nurses face overwhelming workloads, leading to burnout and compromising the quality of care. The government's failure to improve working conditions and address staff shortages has resulted in a significant brain drain, with many healthcare professionals leaving South Africa to work abroad, exacerbating the challenge within the public healthcare system. Okay, it's not in the script. Poor working conditions in these states, in the public domain, cannot be exaggerated. That's like a freaking, that's like 10-hour video series I can make. I won't make it because I'm not a healthcare. If there's a YouTuber like who's in South African healthcare, they can legitimately start a YouTube channel and only talk about. For me, this is only a small paragraph. You can make a permanent YouTube channel about this and you will have content like not just a weekly video. You will have content every day if you're connected, if you know people who can give you some information, because it's hectic. There's been violations of female doctors in hospitals, because look, doctors have to be there all the time, right? 24 hours, because it's hospital. And it happens, freaking in India, violations of female doctors. They have to lock themselves into rooms when they rest, the doctors and the nurses. They have to lock themselves in, to protect themselves because of the poor security. There's not the hospitals don't have armed guards, guys packing, well, they really should be packing. What South African hospitals need are several, depending on, a clinic should have maybe 2 or 3 army personnel carrying R1 assault rifles, not pistols. Not pistols, assault rifles. A major hospital like Chris Hani Baragwanath, dare I say 30 guys packing R1s, AR-15 kinds of rifles. I know this sounds insanely crazy. I know how this sounds, introducing guns and violence into a hospital. But the doctors, the personnel, the staffers, the receptionists, the cleaners are in severe danger. Remember, that there's a lot of criminals in South Africa that, that's in the system. In the prisons. And the prisons, by the way, is also a general disaster area. So they stab each other, they fall sick, then they go to the hospitals. Now, they may try to escape from these hospitals. That's a security risk. They may be gang leaders or whatever, someone may try to kill them in the hospital. So that is, that's why I'm saying, you can't have a single security guard with mace in guarding a clinic or a hospital, and that's what they seem to have. that's totally insufficient. Like, I once went to a clinic and the guy had nothing but a baton. He didn't even have a two-way radio. Like, he had a baton. That's nothing. And the guy was like middle-aged. It was like my age. Like, how do like a middle-aged guy with a baton beat off like 3 criminals with knives? I'm not even talking if they have guns. Like, that's impossible. So that's just the security part. We're not talking about the pay yet, like the money, the reimbursement of the doctors. We're not talking about that yet. That's poor. Then thirdly, being understaffed is a lot of pressure on the doctors. You get less sleep. If you get less sleep, you're much more stressed out. And I'm not a doctor, so I can't talk a lot more about this. I know about 10 years ago, one of my friends was like a civil engineer, and his wife, who's a doctor, they went to Canada because South Africa for them became unlivable. Or 15 years ago, I don't know when they left, but that was a huge blow because professionals tend to marry professionals. So here you have like an engineer and a doctor leaving at the same time because they're married, right? And this is something the ANC could have prevented. I know it's difficult to fix a society with a high Gini coefficient like South Africa overnight, or even 10 years, or even 100 years. I know that's very difficult, sometimes even impossible, but there's basic things you can do. Like, South Africa is not in a war with anyone. Okay, we have like some peacekeepers in the DRC and in Sudan, but our army is large enough to employ them in places like hospitals. That's soft targets. Employ the army in these places. We're not in a war. Why should we? What are the army guys doing? And I'm not saying the army guys are lazy. That's not my argument at all. I'm saying the army, we're not going to be attacked because South Africa has a good foreign policy. Well, we'll talk about the foreign, but we have a good foreign policy in the sense we don't really have enemies that will attack us. We have very good relationship with our neighbors, so we're not in danger. China will never attack us. The USA will never attack us. That's just nonsense. Anyone who tell you differently is conspiracy monger. So put the army. Even if they do, the army can be redeployed, like mobilized, redeployed, put on trucks or planes and just move to a different place. But later, use the army more often to help the police. The police, now and then the police have assault rifles, but mostly they just have the 9mm. The 9mm, has some limitations, mostly accuracy. So, get more army people to guard the hospitals, pay the doctors more. Another thing you should do is maybe, now it's controversial. Now I don't know what I'm talking about, but maybe lower the entry level for medicine. I wanted to study medicine. It's very embarrassing to admit, but my marks weren't high enough. I believe the time I wanted to study medicine in 1999, I needed I think 90% or something for basically, I don't know, for all my subjects, 90 or 80% for all of my subjects. I got 75. So that wasn't the high because I was kind of lazy. It's I like watching TV quite a bit. So I was just oh fuck, it's very difficult. I've got some ADD as well. So I'm just yeah, I couldn't like qualify. But let's say you just bring it down and like make it. So yeah, I know. Look, I know why one of the reasons that people are that there's a high entrance like bar is you want to make sure, because studying medicine is like what, 6 years, right? Like that the people like pull through, that they actually finish what they start. And to be honest, like in my case personally, it would not have been something I may have finished. Like that's why I went into engineering. But like because it's shorter, it was like kind of easier. But maybe lower the entrance requirement, like lower it to like 80 or 70, like 70%, and then just manage the student, like make sure they don't drink alcohol on weekends, make sure they don't get addicted to TikTok, monitor these things. We have technology now, we can monitor them. Like many people say, like, oh, 1984 is like a horrible thing. It's not. It's why is it a horrible thing? Are you a pedophile? Like, are you a terrorist? Yes. Then 1984 is a very bad thing. If you're a law-abiding citizen, what are you afraid of? So seriously, what are you afraid of? So we have these things. We can monitor people. And if we can make these students pull through, like. One of my friends was a doctor, and it was so funny. Like, I went to have a barbecue with him, and I was hoping to get stories, like these exotic stories about health problems and things that he did. He told me his life is boring. 95% of the people he see have a cold or a rash. Nothing more than that. Why do you need to study for 6 years to deal with these problems? What if you created like, okay, so I know nurses exist, but like some degree or some position between a doctor and a nurse, someone that is just smart enough to basically, who knows a bit more than a nurse, but is also smart enough to see if something is out of their domain, to then refer it to a doctor. But someone who can do some basic care, like let's say an army medic. If you get like, for example, stomach, a thing that happens often in South Africa is you'll get stabbed by a knife. Someone who can just like fix the arteries, like stitch up the arteries, close the wound, clean the wound, and save your life. Someone like that can't be rocket science. I don't know. If you're a doctor, please tell me if I'm saying something retarded. I'm just saying, like, geez, like 6 years, really? Like, is that truly the minimum? Is there no way we can optimize the system? But it seems that the ANC is unable to do this. Okay, let's continue. The life as a Okay, I've got it now. The life as a Dimani tragedy stands out as one of the most tragic failures in the ANC-led healthcare administration. In 2015, the Gauteng Department of Health decided to terminate its contract with Life Esidimeni, a private healthcare provider that cared for psychiatric patients, to cut costs. Over 1,300 patients were transferred to unlicensed and ill-equipped NGOs without adequate oversight, resulting in severe neglect, malnutrition, and poor living conditions. The decisions led to the death of 144 mentally ill patients who suffered from inadequate health care in unsafe environments. The Life Esidimeni scandal revealed significant flaws in the ANC's healthcare governance, including the lack of accountability, poor decision-making, and an apparent disregard for the welfare of vulnerable patients. This incident sparked national outrage and highlighted the urgent need for reform in the healthcare system. I remember this clearly. This was like out of a movie, like the newspaper reports, like how the press works. Like first there's this story, there's one story in the news, and then it's kind of like you kind of have to dismiss it to an extent because it's just one, it's just this drop in the bucket. And you don't really pay a lot of attention to it. Then the next week there's 3. The week after that there's 5. And in the next 6 months there's 100. So it just came out. Like what they did is this life epidemic. They just like send people to normal people, they send mentally ill people to some guy with a house with a spare room, was a spare garage or a spare storeroom, and they put those people in there. They did all kinds of crazy shit. Like they would either not feed them, they would beat them, because like mentally ill people, like because I told you with the medicine, like people wouldn't get adequate medication if you're mentally ill, if you've got like schizophrenia or something, you need your medicine or anti-anxiety drugs, and then you freak out if you don't get like this anti-anxiety drug, and then these people who are not trained health professionals, they would just beat them with sticks, chain them to the wall. I've heard a story of that, like violate them in some instances, making them lay in their own waste. Horrible conditions, and yeah, we're talking here about the death of 144 people. These are the deaths out of 1,300 patients. Now, let's try to imagine the best case scenario of these 1,300. What was that like? So you see this is another big problem, like sometimes the ANC, they mention here ill-equipped NGOs as well. Like NGOs, quite often when we think about NGOs, we think about this angel, the seraphim-like figures that come and they do good. Some of them are terrible. They're terrible human beings, like even Mother Teresa. Like I want to do a video about Mother Teresa. Like apparently, she was not the angel. Like, some NGOs are not even, they are well-meaning, but they fuck up. Like I know of this little NGO working in my city, and they care for they care for street people. And what I understand about street people, hobos, or what do you call it? There's the homeless, who just lie in the street. That in 50% of cases, they did a study in Sweden because they couldn't understand why in Sweden, which is so advanced, people will still lie in the street. They realized these are people who are mentally ill, who have not been cared after. And this is why they're in the street. Like, there's no CBT, there's no hypnosis therapy, meditation classes, medication, for mentally ill people. Like, they're in the street. So I asked my friend, well, it's great that you give them clothes and food. No one else the state isn't doing that. Like, are you giving them medication? Are you talking to them? No, of course not. But you see, then you're not addressing the root of the problem. You're just getting a photo opportunity with I almost said lumpen proletariat. Of course not. Like the people who are worst off in society, the people who have fallen through the net that no one cares about, you're taking advantage of them, for some attention, for some like respect in the community or some money. Like, my word, there's a noise outside. Thank God for this microphone, it's directional. And that's the problem with the ANC in all areas, and it happened in the health as well. There's very few due diligence studies about like what is this organization like, this NGO? How legitimate are they? Like, show me your bank record, show me your tax record, show me your CV, do you have a criminal record? Like, how many references can you give me? Like, show me all your facilities. Like, would you mind if we do a polygraph test? Okay, I know polygraph tests don't really work. Would you mind if we do a blood test to see if you're using any drugs? Would you mind being interviewed by a psychologist for like the next month, 2 hours a session, just to see what kind of person you are? You see, like what vetting are done on these organizations? Do you get money from Russia? Whatever. Like, you want to do vetting, and like quite often, nepotism. I don't think I've mentioned nepotism in any of my ANC videos, but like the ANC suffers from nepotism as well, not as much as in other countries, but a fair amount. That you will just like, contract this problem to someone else, and that person is super incompetent. Let's continue. The ANC's failures in healthcare extended to maternal and child health, where the government has struggled to achieve consistent improvements. Although South Africa has made strides in reducing maternal and child mortality rates, challenges persist due to poor healthcare infrastructure, limited access to specialized services in rural areas, and inadequate staffing. Reports of mothers giving birth in overcrowded facilities or without adequate medical supervision are still common, particularly in impoverished communities. The government's inability to ensure consistent standards of care across the country has led to disparities in healthcare outcomes, with rural and underserved populations suffering the most. So, yes, like, this is a weird paragraph in the sense that when thinking about South Africa even up until now, remember apartheid. When we talk, I mentioned it before, when we talk about, let's say, light-hearted videos, tourism, culinary stuff, makeup videos, piano videos, whatever, in South Africa, that's the light-hearted stuff. When we talk about the dark stuff, it's impossible not to mention the ANC. It's impossible not to mention apartheid. Now, an easy way to try to explain what happened between 1994, the fall of fascism, up until now, is it something like the reconstruction of Iraq, if that makes any sense. So it's a very difficult job. And I know this is a failure video, which I'm just supposed to say bad things about the ANC, but it's a very difficult difficult job, because like Iraq or Afghanistan, you have to Afghanistan after the US took it over, they lost it again, but you have to lay roads where they've never been before. You have to put in electricity where there's never been electricity. Same with water, same with telecoms. All of these things are hospital needs, or a clinic. And you have to build a clinic. Then you have to convince a doctor to go and live there. which will usually be a resident doctor, which is inexperienced. And it's a very difficult job, I understand, but all countries do it. They have to, but with varying degrees of success. Like, obviously, Sweden will be much better, like, on the Faroe Islands or whatever. They will do much better than, let's say, the southern part of, like, Somalia, which is not just a failed state, but is a failed state controlled by an ISIS-affiliated group. So yeah, it's on a spectrum, like. However, people voted for the ANC, and this is like in this series, I will always come back to it. People voted for the ANC because they believed in them and because they trusted them. So this is a violation of trust. People wanted you to build a clinic in this village where you live, or they wanted you to build a clinic. Maybe building a clinic in a village where 20 people live is super unrealistic, but they wanted you to build a clinic in the radius that will include 20 villages, okay? And you didn't do it, or you did a poor job of it, or you built one and then it collapsed, or the electricity got cut off, or whatever. Like, the doctors never came. So that's a failure, because you promised to do something and then you didn't do it. That's per definition a failure. So you see, there is this duality. It's a victory and a failure. And yeah, then child mortality. South Africa has a significant amount of child mortality. Luckily, nothing like freaking, I don't know, what's a place which will have high child mortality, like Libya or Papua New Guinea or Haiti. We're not like that, but it's not, no baby should die. That's why where you want to go. I know it's not realistic, but like, one should strive for a zero child mortality rate. Mental health services in South Africa has also been neglected under ANC leadership. Mental health care remains underfunded, and services are often inaccessible for many South Africans. There are few specialized facilities for mental health, and many primary healthcare providers lack the resources and training needed to adequately address mental health conditions. This lack of mental health infrastructure has led to the situation where mental health conditions are often untreated or stigmatized, leaving many individuals and families without the support they need. The ANC's failure to prioritize mental health care reflects broader gaps in its approach to healthcare, where certain essential services continue to be overlooked. So yes, mental health care is super important as well in any society. And unfortunately, okay, this is going to sound controversial and stuff, but I'm just going to say it and I'm going to stand by it. Transgender people now have much more freedom. Well, transgender healthcare is another thing South Africa has kind of failed at. We succeeded at, the ANC rather, not us, South Africa. We have succeeded in the rights sector of transgender, but not the general healthcare sector. You must remember that transgender people are usually very depressed individuals. If you're a depressed person, you need antidepressants. And antidepressants, they may be taken, if you're lucky, you only have to take antidepressants for 3 months. If you're unlucky, you have to take antidepressants your entire life. Depression is a very interesting beast. We know very little about depression medically. I want to do more videos about it. It was very, very interesting. Medication is crucial for mental health patients, like it is for people with heart conditions, like it is for people with diabetes, like it is for people with cancer. However, there is still the stigma, like in many, many countries, and it's actually worse with this freaking new wave of weird left and right wing activists who kind of claim who's anti-pharma and who claims to just, suck up and be a man, or, men actually suffers from this disproportionately more than women, because it's assumed that if you're a man, then nothing can happen to you, which is wrong. Like more men commit suicide than women. That's a fact. So mental health is very important. Not just medication, also like psychology. Like you have to get treatment, someone to talk to. Your mother, who loves you, isn't necessarily the best person to talk to if you've got a mental health disaster. Your best friend, your brother, your genetic brother, they're not the best people necessarily. Maybe they can be if they're a psychologist. But even then, the best person to talk to if you're in such a crisis would be a psychiatrist or a psychologist or both. And yes, you can't just have a cut in this in medication. And it's a frequent story in South Africa that people just can't get their medication for schizophrenia. They can't get their medication for bipolar, because the state will just not have it. It won't be in stock. Because remember, when you go to the state hospital, you have to wait in a line, and the line is long. So it takes, you have to take, if you go to the hospital just to pick up medicine, not for a examination even, it is basically you have to take the whole day off work. Okay, yes, that's the problem with healthcare in South Africa. So you have to somehow explain to the boss that you are, to your clients or whatever, that you're not available today. Now you go to the hospital and they don't have the medicine. They're come back next week. Now you have to take a day off another week, the next week. And it's not necessarily that they're going to have it the next week. It might be 2 or 3 weeks from now. But remember, there will be a rush once the stock come in, because you're not the only person who didn't get it. It's freaking 50 other people didn't get it as well. Now they're all rushing to the hospital. So of course, you're lucky if you get the medication. And that's why people are still dying from any kind of disease, like freaking AIDS. If I haven't mentioned it earlier, I don't think I did. Maybe I mentioned it in the Victories video. People rationing their AIDS medication because the other person just couldn't get their drugs. So they ration, or they share. Friends share medication amongst one another. And it doesn't work. Because remember, medication is designed to, for your body weight. It's designed to have a certain pharmaceutical effect on the body. You can't ration the dose. The milligram, it's 10 milligrams for a reason, and just the other day, about a week ago, at the time of the making of this video in end of November 2024, there was a mining incident of illegal miners in South Africa, where they were basically trapped by the police in this abandoned old mine. They were illegally mining gold, a bunch of foreigners from other countries, and the police trapped them with the reasoning that, okay, what they're doing is illegal and dangerous because the mine doesn't belong to them. Also, the work they're doing, there's no safety. Also, they need to be deported because they're illegal immigrants. These people are so desperate. They're coming from countries like Zimbabwe, Lesotho, where where situation is very disparate. So they don't want to come out yet, but some of them have AIDS. Like AIDS, by the way, is also it's like miners in the mining community. AIDS is disproportionately high because mining is a very stressful job, highly stressful. So because of the stress of mining, you may get naughty sometimes because you don't want to relieve the stress. So you may get a disease like AIDS. And then a lot of these guys in the mine had AIDS. And they had medication. They took medication with them into the mine. But then the freaking police cut it off. They cut off their AIDS medication. And the miners asked, just give us, we don't even want food. Just give us the AIDS medication. We can't stop taking it. And they wouldn't give it to them. You see, that's the ANC for you. So, failure on so many fronts. So many fronts. But my takeaway from this video is the failure of AIDS, of HIV/AIDS, their failure in dealing with it. And I really hope, that this won't happen again, ever, that we have such a disaster ever. The good news is that it's a virus. We have science. We can deal with it. And because this has happened, we have knowledge. We have learned from it. I say learned because we have the knowledge. It's written down. It's recorded. And that we don't make this mistake again. Whether it be the ANC or any other future government in South Africa, not just with AIDS, but with any virus, any disease, any bacteria, any fungus, with fungus like, what's that TV series? I watch a lot of TV. Was it The Last of Us with Pedro Pascal and what's that actress? She's pretty good. The one, she was in Shameless, like she was the baby girl in Shameless. Then she grew up. Now she's in The Last of Us, like where the earth is taken over by this fungus. It can be a fungus. It can be a parasite, whatever. That the government in South Africa deals with this in a scientific way. Because unfortunately there are agents. And I almost call them evil people, but they're not evil. People who distrust science for various reasons. It's dangerous. It puts people's lives in danger. And there is no joy in telling people after someone else have died from this virus, oh, told you so. You know, that's just schadenfreude. And there should never be this, like, the schadenfreude will, like, undoubtedly put you in the position to show this, like, eternal enemy of yours or whatever, like, oh yeah, I was right and you were wrong, you're retarded, like, no, you know, someone has died. This is serious. Like, you know, and we should like focus on how to prevent the AIDS from never happening again. And my understanding from this script is that listen to the scientists, do what they tell you. And if a foreign government is being unfair about the medicine, break the patent. Even although it's illegal in international law, break the patent so you can save people. The life and the health and the well-being of your electorate. Not just the electorate, everyone in the country, everyone that's your citizen or your sovereign citizen, it doesn't matter. You have to take care of them. It's your duty. So you have failed in AIDS. We can't bring back the lives of these people. But now you have the opportunity to never make this mistake again. Thank you for listening to me in this video. If you know someone who has died from AIDS, I am very sorry that this has had to happen to you. Like, if you're an AIDS orphan, I'm very sorry about this. Like, I can't even start to imagine how your life has been. Like, if you're a doctor who has to work or had worked, if you're a nurse who worked, if you're a cleaner who worked in a South African hospital, I'm sorry for the experience you had or the experience you're having in the hospital. I hope we can fix it. Thank you and have a good day. Goodbye.